We're over a week in since the transfer portal has opened, and Illinois is yet to get a commit. Will that be changing soon? Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Illini, your daily podcast on the Illinois Fighting Illini. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Illini. Thank you so much for making us your first listen every single day. Simple reminder, you can help support the channel by simply just hitting that like button or simply making sure you're subscribed. It costs you guys nothing, but it sends this show out to other Illini fans just like you. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So admittedly, it's kind of tough being an Illini fan. This week, at least, we have an 8-day period between basketball games. And obviously, Illinois doesn't play its football bowl game until the end of the season. So a lot of us are just kind of restless watching the transfer portal commence because a lot of our rivals, Wisconsin, Minnesota in particular, and even Nebraska's had a couple commits recently, are making moves. I think Wisconsin itself has 9 already commitments from this transfer portal. And here we are as Illinois, just still waiting for our first ones. Now, fortunately, we haven't had any drastic defections as of yet. Again, we still have plenty of time for a bigger name to drop out. But it would be nicer and maybe probably put a lot of us more at ease should we be able to start getting a couple of those commitments and lock down some of the guys that we've had on visits. I just want to give you a quick update on some of the guys that are visiting campus and some that have been, and maybe get an idea of who might be the first one to commit to the Illini during this portal season. First guy I wanted to talk about was Miles McVay. McVay visited the Illini a couple days ago, and a lot of us, including myself, were pretty confident that if there was a commitment to happen, it would have happened then and there. It seemed like both sides were mutually open to a partnership with the other, but it was recently announced that Miles is also going to be taking a visit to Syracuse and I believe North Carolina. Now, what happened? Miles would have seemingly fit right in at the left tackle spot, which is probably the number one spot that Illinois is trying to fill over this offseason with J.C. Davis leaving. Now, from what I've heard, Miles was open to coming to Illinois, and Illinois was open to having Miles. There was an evaluation period, but sometimes people are involved that aren't necessarily Miles or Illinois. I think at this point, when you're a young, talented left tackle, in particular in this economy, this NIL economy, you can fetch quite the payday. So what I'm suspecting, and I can't confirm this one way or the other, is that Miles is just trying to confirm how much he's worth in the open market. That doesn't mean he won't ultimately commit to the Illini. Am I less enthusiastic and optimistic that he's going to suit up in Champaign next season? Sure. In my opinion, once a recruit leaves campus, the odds of him ultimately turning around and coming back decrease by the day. But I just think right now Miles might be comparing offers. Let's see. He looks like he wants to play in Champaign, but is it worth it to play in Champaign for 30% cheaper than maybe what a North Carolina or a Syracuse is going to offer you? I mean, right now, North Carolina in particular with that Bill Belichick hire is going all out when it comes to their football team. They really want to put the best product out there. And it's hard to question not wanting to be coached by a guy like Bill Belichick. I mean, this is the excuse we use with Bret Bielema all the time, right? With other teams, it's like, or other recruits, why wouldn't you want to come play for Bret? He's going to develop you. He knows exactly what needs to be done and to get you ready for the next level. And that's an argument that we can use for 95% of our competitors. But Bill Belichick and the North Carolina Tar Heels are probably one of the other coach team combos out there that can probably say the same thing. Bill's probably, of course, got those contacts out in the NFL world as well. So that's the one I'm probably going to look out for. Again, in my bum, sure, would I have liked to lock down McVay and not have to worry about the left tackle position for the next 3 seasons? Of course, especially with the premium that position costs. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we don't have backup options at that left tackle spot. Recently, Aiden Napick, a 6'6", 295-pound left tackle, announced that he had an offer from Illinois and will be visiting Champaign later this week. Now, Aiden looks like he can be a solid option himself. First team All Big Sky selection this past year. He started for Idaho for 3 seasons, and he's got a very good pass blocking grade with PFF at 78 and a 67.2 PFF grade overall. Now, does he have the upside of someone like Miles? Probably not, but maybe that's not necessarily what we're looking for. Again, right now, when it comes to this wild, wild west of finances that this NIL era has become, at least for this one final season. Obviously, next year we have the revenue sharing, so things will hopefully even up a little bit. But Bret and the staff have to kind of figure out, like, if you have limited funds, is it worth it to spend 2-3x for a guy who doesn't exactly have that much film on tape at the college level, like someone like Miles McVay? Or if you like what you see from a guy like Aiden, who's, again, started 3 seasons, maybe if you can get that guy at a discount for this particular season, it's worth it. Again, this year it's all about maximizing the fact that you have Luke Altmaier back for one more season. So I'm very curious, when Aiden does visit later this week, can he become our first commit? I wouldn't necessarily be surprised. I'm also going to be monitoring the Miles McVay situation because I don't think the door is closed yet completely. But obviously, if Aiden shows interest in committing, I think it would be foolish for Bret Bielema to not lock that one down. Speaking of Luke Altmaier, another talented player who's visiting Champaign, I believe on Tuesday, is Ethan Hampton, the transfer quarterback from Northern Illinois. Now, obviously, quarterback isn't a huge need when it comes to the Illini. Hopefully, we can have Luke Altmaier healthy for another season. But sometimes you just don't want to play those odds. And Hampton is kind of a character that could be similar to what Bret Bielema had with John Paddock a couple seasons ago. Obviously, with the departure of Leary, with the departure of Cal Swanson, that quarterback's room, while talented, is very young. And so with us being so focused on maximizing what the 2025 season can be, it might make sense to have a guy, a veteran, backup to Luke, so that you're not necessarily trusting a redshirt freshman when it comes to winning games for you on the field against a schedule that, if you watched yesterday's video, seems pretty desirable. Ethan Hampton, again, he's a redshirt junior. He originally committed to Wake Forest a couple days ago, but for those of you who have been paying attention, Wake Forest head coach Dave Clawson, one of the best in the business, decided to hang it up. And because Ethan had not signed any of the paperwork, he's able to drop back into the transfer portal. I believe he's announced he's visiting Illinois and Tulane this week, and Tulane just took on a different quarterback. So I wonder if this is just a race that it's Illinois' to lose. Now, is Ethan content being a backup? Some quarterbacks are okay knowing that they're just a snap or two away from playing Big Ten football. But maybe Ethan's one of those guys who wants to go somewhere and be a starter, even if it's at a smaller school. I don't have a vibe one way or the other. Again, he's going to be on campus probably while you're watching this video or listening to this podcast. So that's going to be another thing to be mindful of. Again, no groundbreaking names as of yet. And I'm not even saying this is the order of importance for what Illinois needs to be looking for. Illinois is obviously being very patient when it comes to the transfer portal, and I think they're kind of waiting to see where the market eventually settles. I'm going to keep you up to date on what other names might be stopping by in Champaign. Again, the 3 guys I just mentioned during this episode are mainly guys who I think could be candidates for the first commitment of the transfer portal season for the Illini. But I'll keep you guys up to date as I hear news. You'll be the first one to hear it, in particular if you were in our Discord community. Shout out to you guys. Link will be in the description. You'll hear news as soon as I get it. And the rest of you here at Locked On Illini, just make sure you're subscribed, and you'll hear it on the following episode. It's that time of the year. The college football playoff is back, and with the newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports coverage of the college football playoff begins December 21st, starting with the college football playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern, leading into our first matchup, the Southern Methodist University Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then, the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the college football playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. All right, it's Tuesday, and Tuesdays here at Locked On Illini, I bring back my friend, Big Ten Ted from the Big Ten Ted Show. Ted, thanks for joining us.
It's great to be here. Great to be here. You know, we're still, I'm so excited for this weekend, man. I am so excited for this first round of playoff games. 3 Big Ten teams in action. Of course, Oregon, the Big Ten champion, has a bye this week, but yeah, it's going to be a great time. We've been waiting kind of, I've been a fan of the Packers. You've been a fan of the Bears for a long time. And, we've seen these home playoff games in December and January, and we saw how cool that they can be. And having these games on campus is certainly going to be something else this weekend.
Well, as you said, I'm a Bears fan, so I haven't exactly seen that many playoff games, at least in my lifetime recently. But Ted, before we start talking about the playoff, it's transfer portal season. And Illinois in particular hasn't been quite as noisy as some of its competitors when it comes to the additions on when it comes to the transfer portal. But I would argue Illinois is still one of the winners so far, in the sense where they've announced over the weekend that Luke Altmaier, their starting quarterback, is returning for his senior year. Now, Luke is the type of player who, had he decided to test the waters, he could have made a lot of money being arguably the best quarterback in the market.
Yeah, he could have. But yeah, here's the thing. I'm glad, that he was certainly coming back. Drew Aller also coming back at Penn State. But I'm glad that he's coming back. There's so much movement today in college football. And you mentioned kind of guys going from one school to another and certainly making the financial dollar that they're able to. And all props to them, right? That's certainly within their right to do so. But maybe we need to reward people for currently from sticking around, right? There's all sorts of, when you kind of go from maybe a new cell phone company to another, right? There's, hey, if you come over here and you're a new customer, you get this deal, right? But there's no deal if I stick around for 6 years as an AT&T customer, right? And so I'm going to reward Luke Altmaier. I'm going to give Luke Altmaier his props, certainly, for sticking around at Illinois, where maybe others probably won't. So it's certainly great to see him. But now the question for Illinois becomes, how do you build around him? Of course, you lose Pat Bryant, one of the best receivers in the conference. Zachary Franklin is also gone. So they got to find a way to kind of backfill this wide receiver room so they can have another type of 9-win season for Illinois next season. So they're going to have to be active in the transfer portal, certainly, to be able to get those high quality options in at wide receiver for next year. We know that they're probably sitting pretty good in the running back room right now. You get Caden Fagan coming back off of an injury. You get Khalil Valentine, of course, a young kid in this Illinois running back room. So for me, got to find targets to be able to take advantage of the quarterback talent that is Luke Altmaier coming back for 2025.
Yeah, I've talked about it on the show, so my everydayers have heard me say this already, but 2025 is actually gearing up to be a potentially very good year for the Illini. Yeah. The schedule came out last week, and it does not look very intimidating. Illinois could bring back anywhere from 15 to 18 starters from last year's football team, a team that won 9 games and only lost 3. The wide receiver room, as you mentioned, is we probably would like to bring in one guy that you can kind of rely on as the number one target. It's very young, it's very talented, and a lot of these guys did make jumps this past season. But let's be honest, Ed, when we previewed this season, I was unsure about Pat Bryant being able to make the jump. So maybe, we can have a Hank Beatty or a Colin Dixon who've shown flashes this past season make that leap. But I agree with you. I know we had that wide receiver, Key from Kentucky, visit Champaign, but he's visiting Georgia, Ole Miss, Nebraska. And so usually when you're kind of battling those type of schools, they're offering a bit more money than Champaign would be. But we'll see. He had a relationship with our wide receivers coach, Justin Stepp. So maybe he can be a guy that we can ultimately count on that relationship to lock down. He's the guy who very much reminds me of what Pat Bryant looked like. But even if he's not the guy, I know the transfer portal is open for a couple of weeks now, and then it gets opened up later in the spring too. Maybe that wide receiver isn't here yet, right? I mean, Zachary Franklin himself didn't sign until almost right before the season started. So just because the marquee names when it comes to wide receivers aren't there yet, doesn't mean that there won't be a new name that shows up later in the portal.
Yeah, and you mentioned the schedule for next year. I got it pulled up in front of me right now. You got Ohio State. That Illinois game is on October 11th. That's in Champaign, by the way, this season. But no Michigan's on the schedule. No Penn State is on the schedule. No Oregon is on the schedule, right? And Illinois might have a better draw than anybody with their projected rivals, having those against Northwestern and Purdue every single year. Their non-conference slate, they go to Duke, but it is certainly favorable. You get USC at home. Indiana, we'll see what they look like on the road. So I'm looking up and down this schedule, and yeah, there is a potential certainly for another, maybe at least an 8-win season, maybe a 9-win season, if they can kind of bring everything together here this offseason.
So Ted, just because Illinois hasn't made some noise, maybe you can update my audience on what some of the other Big Ten teams are doing with the transfer portal.
Yeah, of course, you got to start with the Oregon Ducks, what they've been able to do in the secondary. They were going to have a lot of losses in the secondary. Jabbar Muhammad's going to be gone. Nico Reed is going to be gone. Tyson Johnson at safety is going to be gone. Kobe Savage at safety is going to be gone. So it's not a lot of eligibility left in that room. So they went out and got Dylan Thieneman, right? We all know here in Big Ten country how good he is. A combined 200 tackles over his first 2 years. Freshman All-American last year, right, when he was a true freshman. He's all over the field, great range. And then Theron Johnson started every game for Northwestern the past 2 years. He comes in at corner. There's a lot of really good youth in Eugene, Oregon. So I think they're hoping that at the safety and the corner position, that this is that experience, obviously that plug-and-play type of guys, that they can have an experienced guy, like at safety, for example, an experienced guy and maybe a younger guy, and Dylan and Theron can kind of nurture this next generation of the Oregon secondary as well. And then you got to look at Minnesota, what they've been able to do in the portal so far. BJ Fleck has gone in and he has hammered it. In 1 week, 10 commits for the University of Minnesota. You look at former Washington running back Cam Davis, who in 2022 was a really good number 2 option when Michael Penix was there at Washington. A.J. Turner from Marshall, Cole Cabana from Michigan. These are all running backs, right, by the way. So there's going to be a lot of depth certainly in that room right now. Rashawn Lawrence is a defensive line transfer from Stony Brook. That was a first-team All-CAA over there at the FCS level. So they're getting Javon Tracy from Miami of Ohio is a really good wide receiver type of option that they need to be able to replace guys like Daniel Jackson and Elijah Spencer in Minneapolis. But, Minnesota has been that team. Wisconsin going out and getting Billy Edwards to be their quarterback. Danny O'Neal is kind of a younger guy that comes over for San Diego State over there as well. And then to wrap things up, a familiar name, Donovan McCulley transferring, former Indiana wide receiver. He's headed over to Ann Arbor to try to bolster that Michigan offense as well. So we're 1 week in, and there's been a lot of movement.
A lot of movement, and there'll be continuing to be a lot of movement over the next couple of weeks. But right after this, Ted's going to preview the college football playoff. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more. FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000x your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. Make your holidays bigger and brighter with Prize Picks, the best place to get real money action while watching your favorite sports. Join now because this holiday season, Prize Picks is giving away 2 free picks in December, and they're giving away $30 million plus in rewards during Prize Picks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, just download the app today and use code Locked On College to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, Ted. So Friday, Indiana, our Big Ten brethren, faces off against Notre Dame. Tell us about that matchup as well as the others.
Oh, this is going to be a fun one to kick things off. The Indiana State Championship. Both the Irish and the Hoosiers hung 60+ on the Boilermakers this season. So this is it. This is for all the marbles in the state of Indiana between the Irish and the Hoosiers. These teams have not met a lot over the course of time, certainly because Notre Dame has had that in-state rivalry with Purdue over the years and, of course, their other schedule. But, man, it's all about when I kind of start to break this game down. Notre Dame's run game is as good as it gets. Of course, Jeremiah Love got a little bit banged up in the USC game. Sounds like he'll be ready to go for this game. Indiana, they have the top run defense in all of college football. They're the only team in the country to allow less than 1,000 yards. They've only given up 850 yards as a defense this year. They're the only team in college football to allow less than 80 rushing yards per game, and they're giving up 70.8. But this is as good as Indiana has seen from an offensive line perspective, just from a run game perspective. We know what Notre Dame wants to do. They want to run downhill. It's that good-on-good matchup. And then on the other side, can Indiana block Notre Dame up front? Now, is Notre Dame as good as, like, say, the Michigan pair in the middle, Ohio State? Maybe not, but this is still a really good defense. It's still a really good Notre Dame defensive line. Like when we've seen Indiana struggle this year, it's when they faced off against really good defensive lines. Look at the game against Michigan. The Wolverines had 4 sacks in that game. They were disrupting the rhythm of Indiana's offense. Ohio State, man, that takes it to another level. They were just living in that backfield. They were taking up real estate next to Curtis Rourke in that game. 5 sacks, and when Jim Knowles figured out after that first drive, when Indiana went down the field, after that, Jim Knowles figured out, hey, if we bring pressure, they're not going to be able to handle it. So if Notre Dame can kind of overwhelm this Indiana offensive line, that could certainly get them out of the rhythm. So Indiana's got to find a way to block. They got to find a way to protect. If they do, look at when Notre Dame's defense has played maybe I should say the better quarterbacks on their schedule. You look at Louisville, Tyler Shuck threw for over 260 yards and 3 touchdowns. Look at that last game, Jade Mailata. He was throwing over 300 yards in that game, and USC was moving the ball up and down the field, and that was a ball game later on before a couple of pick sixes for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish in that game. So although they've got an All-American back there at safety and Xavier Watts, if Indiana can get time, I think Curtis Rourke could have some success down the field. This comes down to which style wins out. Is this game going to be a cold weather, physical, run the ball, defense type of game like Notre Dame wants it to be? Or what if Indiana turns this into a track meet and they're able to get up and down the field? Is Notre Dame able to kind of keep up with them? I think the Irish maybe squeak this one out by just a little bit. And then you take a look. Sorry, Penn State, you get a noon game. I know Fox is not involved in this process, but maybe they are a little bit behind the scenes with this noon kickoff for the Penn State Nittany Lions over there. It's still going to be rocking with the ponies of SMU kind of coming in. SMU's got a good offense. One word that I look at when I see SMU is just balance. It's this balance on the offensive side of the ball. Of course, you got Kevin Jennings at quarterback, and then you look at Brashard Smith running the ball over 1,200 yards and 14 touchdowns this season. And then for SMU, no receiver has over 600 yards this season, but you've got 6 wide receivers or a tight end that have between 330 yards and 599 yards. Long story short, they can get it to a lot of different guys. So Penn State, I think, is going to be tested in the middle of the field, kind of like they were against the Oregon Ducks. Now, SMU does not have a Tess Johnson. Nobody has a Tess Johnson. So I want to make that perfectly clear. But that is going to be maybe a little bit of a challenge, of course. Penn State got to get home. Abdul Carter's got to get home. Dennis Sutton's got to get home. I think that even though SMU has done a good job protecting Kevin Jennings this year, I think that has to do a little bit with the mobility of Kevin Jennings and how his escapability, certainly with his legs. But you got to get home for Penn State because I think that they can overwhelm them. I think something that really hits home with this SMU Penn State game is Penn State is just a different animal. They're just a different animal. SMU has not seen a team like Penn State, but Penn State has seen teams like SMU, and they sure know how to attack them. Of course, the transfer of Bo Prabula is going to affect this game. Certainly, I think we're going to see more of Tyler Warren in those shotgun type of packages to sub in for Bo Prabula, certainly in this game. But, man, when I look at Tyler Warren, and I look at Penn State being able to throw the ball in SMU, they got an advantage because SMU is 4th in the country against the run, but 91st against the pass. So I think Drew Aller, and then I look at I've watched some SMU, and I'm like, man, I think Tyler Warren, they're not going to be able to guard him. They're not going to be able to defend him, right? So I think it's going to be a lot like the Oregon game where they get it to Tyler Warren early, and then SMU is going to shade their defense. They're going to rotate their coverage. They're going to double team in his direction. And just like the Oregon game, that opens up Amari Evans. That opens up Harrison Wallace. That opens up maybe Nick Singleton coming out of the backfield as well. So, yeah, I think Penn State can win this one, certainly by a couple of scores at home. And then the nightcap, Tennessee taking on the Ohio State Buckeyes. You know, you can talk about matchups, offense, defense, special teams, all that. It's all between the ears for the Ohio State Buckeyes, right? The last time we saw them on a football field, they were just mindlessly running the ball into the arms of Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. And Chip Kelly has said as much as says, yeah, man, I really screwed up. Yeah, you think you did? So I thought that was kind of funny. But anyway, moving on. It's all about the mentality. Where are their heads? Are they going to let Michigan beat them twice, or has enough time gone by where they've been able to separate that? I think we're going to learn a lot about Ryan Day and what kind of a coach he is and how he has his team probably in the first half of the first quarter of this game. We're going to find it because the worst thing, we know what the feelings of Ohio State's fan base are right now about this team and about Ryan Day after losing to that Michigan team. If they go 3-and-out and Tennessee goes down the field, you know, what is a perceived advantage for this Ohio State crowd, even though there's going to be some spots of Tennessee fans in there, all of a sudden, this crowd might get really frustrated. So you need to get off to a hot start. You need to play confident. You need to attack Tennessee early so you can keep that crowd on your side. I know it sounds crazy, but that's kind of the state of the Buckeye fan base right now. This is not your 2022 Volunteers, okay? A lot of people if you haven't followed Tennessee a lot, you might think, hey, remember when Hendon Hooker was slinging the ball around and they were taking the goalposts into the Tennessee River after scoring a bunch of points against Alabama? They're a little bit different. Now, Nico Emiliava can sling it, right? He hasn't, I think he's only got like 19 touchdowns or something this year. They've got a good group of wide receivers, but this is a team. Their strengths are the run game and the strengths are their defense, right? You look at Dylan Sampson running the ball. He powers the Power Force top rushing offense. Nearly 1,500 yards, 22 touchdowns. He leads the SEC in both. And then when you look at the Tennessee defense, they're 4th in the country in total defense. These are 2 of the top 4 total defenses in all of college football. Tennessee is 8th against the run. And then what do we know about Ohio State, right? That offensive line, Carter Hinsman now there at center without Seth McLaughlin. We know about Josh Simmons no longer at left tackle. This is a really good Tennessee defense. It's a really good Tennessee defensive line. Are they going to be able to wreak havoc and get this Ohio State offense out of rhythm? But I think the thing is, hey, you got to make sure you got to put confidence into Will Howard. I think when they were running the ball, they really took the ball out of Will Howard's hands after a couple of interceptions against Michigan. So you got to keep the ball in his hands. You got to allow him to make plays because, look, he's going to have to make big plays to be able for them to not only win this game, but to win the next game potentially against Oregon and then keep on going down towards a run for a national championship. Like, the crazy thing about that Michigan game is now everybody has checked out on Ohio State. They've checked out. Like, what did we know about Ohio State before that Michigan game? They lost one game, by 1 point to the only undefeated team in the country. And then it was a gigantic fluke. It was a failure, and every Ohio State fan will tell you that. But if this team is focused, if this team is ready to go, and if they are playing their best, TBD on if that's what we're going to get, this is a team that can certainly beat Tennessee. This is a team that can beat Oregon, certainly in the next round, and they can make that run. So it's crazy to think just the levels that people have dropped Ohio State. But if Ryan Day, if they can circle the wagons, if they can use this and light the fire in that locker room, this is an Ohio State team that could certainly make a run. But, I think Ohio State's home field advantage allows them to squeak this one out at home. I think this one's going to be close. I could see it fairly low scoring against the Volunteers. Man, this is going to be a great weekend.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by this Ohio State team because, like you said, I genuinely think Ohio State's the top 2 team in the country. They have a Michigan problem, right? That loss against Oregon, while tough, you can't really feel bad about losing to Oregon, especially when the game was as tight as it was and as close as it was. But, I know the AD said that there's no risk of Ryan Day not returning next season, but still, I do feel like the taste in the mouth is still there from that Michigan loss. If Ohio State, after spending so much money this offseason on building up this roster, loses in the first round of the college football playoff, I just think that the heat on Ryan Day is going to be unbearable.
Now, so that's interesting. I did see those comments from Ross Bjork about Ryan Day. And what happens if this Ohio State team is clearly broken and Ryan Day does not have them ready to play and they lose 24-10 or something like that. And they finish 10-3 with this roster. Now, I don't think that's going to happen, but I'm not certainly putting it out of the realm of possibility. If that does happen, I think you need to maybe, I'm not saying you need to completely flip your statement and make the opposite decision. But if you're Ross Bjork, I think you need to think about it. But we know the expectations that surround this Ohio State team. But if Ryan Day, that's why I led off with the mentality. If he can't get this team refocused with this talented of a group and they get run off the field by a couple of scores against the Tennessee team, that's a good team. Are they a great team? I don't know if I'd call them a great team right now, but I think they're a really good football team. And if they get if that happens at home, that's tough. I mean, if it's a close loss, I don't think the opinion of Ross Bjork is certainly going to change. But man, there's some scenarios out there where this Ohio State team could struggle with Tennessee's defense. The O-line could struggle with Tennessee's front. And then what happens? So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if that result does happen. Like I said, I think Ohio State wins it close. But, man, it's hard for me to maybe imagine this game being a lopsided 14-point-plus game on either way. But, man, if they lose, there's going to be a lot of heat certainly coming out of Columbus.
Yeah, next week we'll recap the first round as well as preview the quarterfinals. Ted, before I let you go, what's going on your channel?
So, of course, I'll be covering all of these first round playoff games with Indiana taking on Notre Dame, Penn State, SMU, Ohio State, Tennessee. So I'll have all of that coming up this weekend. And then, of course, we've got a lot of transfer news as well. I covered all of these games on Monday's full show of Big Nation. And then I'm going to be posting the segments of each of these previews and predictions throughout the week. So make sure everybody stays tuned for that. And then, of course, after this next week, that's when we'll start looking forward to New Year's Day, where we possibly could have two, I believe, or three, I should say, 3 teams playing. 4 teams could be playing in 3 games is what I'm trying to say. Easy for me to say, but you get the general idea but we'll see indeed if that happens. So we'll kind of start looking forward to the quarterfinals as well.
Best in the world, Ted. We'll see you next week.
All right. Thank you.
And that's going to wrap it up for today's edition of Locked On Illini. On your way out, make sure you've hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. It's still my goal to hit 2,000 subscribers by the end of the calendar year. Either way, we going to be covering Illini sports all week long. Each and every day, you're going to get about a half hour, if not more. Make sure you're subscribed to our social medias, Locked On Illini. Find me on all of them. Send me a message, and you'll know it's me responding back. Lastly, Discord, please. We're communicating constantly, talking Illini sports and just life in general. So if that's your sort of cup of tea, we'd love to have you in that community as well. Until next time, ILL.